Welcome to The Call to Rise, the podcast for sacred rebels, visionaries, and conscious changemakers. Here we sit down with the people birthing the new earth, weaving ancient wisdom with modern strategy to build movements that heal, transform, and uplift our world. I'm Mackenzie Darling, your host, inviting you into honest conversations, practical tools, and hard-won wisdom to awaken your power and to inspire you to answer the call to rise and to meet this moment in history. Welcome, everyone. This is Mackenzie Darling with the Call to Rise podcast. I am so excited today to welcome the legend, Mike Margolies. If you are in the psychedelic world, everyone knows Mike. He is a friendly face, and he is the one that started the Psychedelic seminar series, as well as the co-founder of the Global Psychelic Society, as well as many other ventures. He is like the entrepreneurial within the psychedelic world. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Mackenzie.
Absolutely. I have known Mike for several years now, since we've been stewing in the psychedelic renaissance, swimming in it for several years. And I want to start off, I was really surprised when I went to your page seeing that you were a corporate America dropout, used to work at ExxonMobil. If you see the picture of him, clean cut, I'm like, who is this guy? But I guess let's start there. I'd love to hear your story of how you came from there to where you're at now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my formal education was in chemical engineering. So yeah, I went to University of Maryland and graduated in 2008 and took a job right out of college with ExxonMobil. Yes, I worked for ExxonMobil as a chemical engineer for 5 years in Virginia, in Fairfax, Virginia, then in Houston, Texas at the Baytown refinery. I guess I'll say that, ultimately my experience working in corporate America wasn't necessarily the most fulfilling thing one could do. Various psychedelic experiences helped me along the journey, including a pretty pivotal one in Peru, when I spent a week and a half drinking ayahuasca, and this was back in 2012. So it was like, I think back then ayahuasca wasn't even really that known in many circles. There were some people talking about it for sure, but not nearly as known as it is now. And yeah, so a lot of people in my life thought I was crazy for doing that. But that particular experience sort of zeroed me into something really that I think I already knew deep down, but gave me clarity to kind of see my truth of, and the message was jump without the rope, meaning like I had to quit and move on. I had been debating whether to take a leave of absence or something, but the message was like, no, you got to go and commit to like a different path. And so, long story less long, I ended up quitting my job, going to Burning Man, and then taking a one-way flight to India. And I spent the next 15 months backpacking around India and Southeast Asia, recording a podcast actually called Walking the Earth. And that was kind of where I got some of my chops in of doing interviews and that kind of thing. And at the end of that journey of that period, it was a very important period in my life and a transformative period. It's a discovery of what do you do when you don't have to do anything. Discovering myself, figuring out it was the freest I've ever been, for sure. And it was a remarkable journey. And on the other side of it, coming back to the US, left me with the question of, now what? I didn't want to go back to the whole point, right, of jumping without the rope was not to just go back to what I had been doing. And I didn't know exactly what it was at first, but, what was the thing I was really passionate about? And as I was telling a version of this story and of how psychedelics helped me in my transformation, the person I was talking to in that moment reflected to me that it seemed very obvious what I was passionate about. And then I started psychedelic seminars, and that was, like 11 years ago now. 2015 is when I started that, and then it's been many other projects since then too. But yeah, that's sort of the backstory of how I got from corporate America to being a psychedelic activist.
I love that so much. And I just want to double click on jump without the rope. My
people that we're talking to right here are the ones, the movement leaders, the change makers, and all of us come to that moment where, and I can't tell you how many psychedelic journeys that I had where the medicine was like, jump without the rope, jump without the rope. And it's really that travel between from your head to your heart and your just inner knowing of trust, and then everything just opens up. That was really poignant, I thought.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, it was just like that. It was repeated in that exact way, like jump without the rope, jump without, until I was like, hey, okay, I got it.
Got the message.
And it was for me, it was a Batman reference because I'm a big Batman nerd, and this was in 2012. I was in Peru just after The Dark Knight Rises had come out, and there's this whole scene where Bruce Wayne's in, like, Bane puts him in this open air prison, but you can escape as long as you can climb your way, and there's this jump he has to make, which he doesn't, and while he has the safety harness attached to him, he's never able to quite make it across. But when the old wise man gives him that exact advice to jump without the rope, and Bruce Wayne takes off the rope and he finally makes it across, and so Batman images were coming to me.
Totally. It's so powerful. And also, I feel like societally, we're in this moment where people are waking up to, wait a minute, I'm giving all of my life force energy to other people's dreams and other people's, visions that is that prison. And we're being asked to jump into our own destiny, our own karmic assignment. So I love that vision of the Batman.
Yeah. And another aspect to it for me, too, and for a lot of people, I think it was, at the time I was in, I don't know, kind of the golden handcuffs, if you will, right? Like I was in a job that was well paying. From a conventional measure, I was doing well, and it was kind of crazy to, how can you leave that? And a lot of people did think I was crazy when I told them, oh yeah, I just went and did some psychedelics in Peru, and now I'm going to quit my job and take a one-way flight to India. But it was tapping into this, despite the different signals coming externally, it was about tapping into my inner knowing that, like, even though people were telling me you can't do that, that's exactly. Tapping into my inner knowing of, like, actually, yes, I can. And knowing that, like, and I was fortunate enough, to have the means to be able to do that. And knowing that, like, okay, yeah, I actually have the means. I don't need to create this artificial reason why I can't do this thing. And there's a lot of artificial reasons we can create to stop us from doing something. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really resonating with, I often say that movement leaders, they're ahead of their time. You're usually seen as delusional, and people saying, why are you doing that? That makes absolutely no sense, because you're the one that's supposed to break out of the norms. So that's a very common pattern.
Definitely. If you think about jumping without the rope, there's a connection there to, like, the archetype of, like, the trickster or the fool in tarot. And if you look at, like, the fool card, he's actually literally doing that. He's, like, walking off of the edge of a cliff. And also the role of, like, kind of a trickster archetype too is, like, you break what's currently socially conventional in order to make something new possible. And that was something I hadn't really, because I was also in that same experience seeing, like, jesters and that kind of thing. And it was I didn't fully make that connection until much later, that, like, oh, there's a connection there between jumping without the rope and, like, the fool, the kind of trickster archetype. And yeah, exactly what you said. You do something that breaks the convention to make something new possible. And so that was another aspect.
I love how you bring in trickster, because I actually have a quiz where I have the 7 different movement maker archetypes that are here to restore humanity, and trickster is one of them. And so you'll have to go on my website and take my quiz and get back to me and be like, are you the trickster?
Before we go any further, I want to speak directly to the revolutionaries that are listening. The ones who know that their lives carry a deeper purpose of service in this moment. If you can feel that you weren't meant to simply succeed inside the old systems, but to help reshape what comes next, this invitation is for you. I've created the Movement Maker Archetype Quiz, a powerful tool that reveals one of 7 leadership archetypes emerging right now to guide us through this threshold moment in history. This isn't about personality. It's about discovering your unique leadership medicine, the role you're here to play in our collective transformation. You can take the quiz at quiz.globalmovementmaker.com. That's quiz.globalmovementmaker.com. If something in you knows this moment matters, start there.
Yeah, the jester, trickster archetype is one I do resonate with. I think it can be misunderstood also, but it's definitely one that for the reasons I was just sharing, I feel a resonance with.
It's interesting because all the different archetypes have both their gifts and their challenges and being misunderstood. And I think that that's a big part of movement leadership is you are often misunderstood. You are often the black sheep, the feeling very isolated. Have you felt that way?
I mean, if it was unconventional to quit my job and go to India, coming back and then saying, oh yeah, now I'm going to, and this is in 2015 in Baltimore, saying, I'm going to start producing public-facing events about psychedelic drugs. That was itself like a big taboo thing. And people thought I was like, oh yeah, what are you doing? You're crazy. You can't do that. But again, it was like the point, it was actually very consciously the point was I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to do this thing that's taboo, create spaces publicly to talk about psychedelics in order to make it possible for this to be happening. I wanted to live in a world where we can have open and honest conversations about psychedelics. And so it was like a very like be the change you want to see sort of thing. And so, yeah, every step of the way, I've definitely had experiences of being like feeling isolated and misunderstood. Yeah, deciding to leave in the first place, deciding to start psychedelic seminars. And even like internally today, a lot of like the ideas I bring in terms of like governance of how we run like the organization, it doesn't always at first like catch on. It takes a while. Like we use like, and this is a whole other topic, but like something called Teal organizing, and it's based on a book by Frederic Laloux called Reinventing Organization, and which is itself drawing from Ken Wilber's work.
Which is the best book on the planet.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so great. So we could nerd out on that too if you'd like to go that direction. Yeah. But that's something also internally that has been at different points misunderstood too, or not immediately accepted. And so, yeah, there's just throughout my whole psychedelic career, many examples of that.
It's interesting. When I came into working in psychedelics, I was very surprised in what I learned. I was the chief marketing officer and chief of staff at different psychedelic training organizations and helping to grow different psychedelic churches. And truly what I actually walked away with was both ancient wisdom, which is just could not be more important as we integrate that into our modern world, but also how that relates to how we hold power and how we hold accountability and safety and consent and how we build governance. So I would love to actually get into that conversation, because on your website that you talk about is what makes a healthy psychedelic ecosystem. And, you are like the meta dude to talk about this, because like you are holding all of the global psychedelic communities. So please nerd out and tell us everything you've learned.
Sure. Okay. There's a lot of direction we can go here. I mean, go into psychedelic, healthy psychedelic ecosystem, talk about Teal. I mean, I could try weaving them together a bit here.
You do your magic, Mike, and we're just going to go and let Source take us where it wants to go.
Sure. So healthy psychedelic ecosystem. So there's a lot to say there. And I'm going to also paraphrase some ideas from my co-founder, and Jazz talks about like these three pillars of the psychedelic movement. And two of them that get a lot of attention are the research and medical pillar and the policy pillar, which are important. We've seen both of those pillars. We've seen research change the culture, and we've seen in turn when policy changes, of course, that changes the culture. And the reverse is also true, right? What makes more research and more policy change possible is the culture. And that third pillar is kind of culture and community. And it's not as emphasized, but that's a lot of the work that we're doing at Global Psychelic Society. And what I was doing with psychedelic seminars before as well is, this idea of how do you create the cultural conditions so that, the policy can change, so that the post-prohibition world can emerge. You think, and I'm very inspired by thinkers like Buckminster Fuller talks about that to change something, you can't fight the existing reality. You have to build the new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So
Yes.
if you want to end the drug war, what is the model that makes the drug war, that makes prohibition obsolete? What does that post-prohibition world look like? What are the models? And when I really like sit into that, it's education and community, right? In the post-prohibition world, yeah, we need that structure because if people have access openly to psychedelics or any other substance, they need good information about the benefits and the risks. And you need community, you need peers, you need elders. And so my kind of theory of change is like, yeah, we build that infrastructure. We're going to build the infrastructure needed, such the education and community infrastructures, so that we can create the conditions for a post-prohibition world to be possible. And so that was the point of psychedelic seminars, of creating educational spaces. And now with Global Psychelic Society, I take things I've learned and I help others to do it. But there's hundreds of independently emergent psychedelic societies all over the world. And the Global Psychedelic Society is a network that's connecting all those different independent organizations together, so that, well, in part, yes, we're sharing skills with them, but also they're also sharing skills with each other. And so building that mycelial web so that all the learnings that happen when one group figures something out, that can be shared with other groups. And there's plenty more we could say on that too. But yeah, to go back to the question here about like the healthy psychedelic ecosystem, yeah, the piece that I'm really focused on is, I mean, and it requires all of these pieces, but I think community is really like the foundation of this whole thing. And that's, you need the culture and the community aspects to allow the rest to happen. So that's why I focus a lot of my energy and attention there.
Yeah, thank you. That was so rich. And I love what you've really done is that you've taken all of these communities, as you said, and built the mycelial network, which really is the infrastructure of a movement. A lot of what I'm bringing to the table is like trying to educate the public on a different way of building, because up until this point, it's been like siloed, business-oriented, like our own communities. And it's time for us to have more decentralized power and leadership. And if you're a leader, your job is to train other leaders to then be able to feed back into the ecosystem and have that flywheel of like, okay, we're just co-creating together, and then exactly that mycelial network. And I loved how you said it's time for us, because we keep trying to like fight the system. And the system isn't working. So we need to now build the infrastructure. How do you build differently? So that was just really rich.
Yeah, thanks. And adding on to some of the things you were saying, like, yeah, that structure, the mycelial structure, and where I think one thing that's really important, and this gets kind of into the Teal type of ideas as well, it's not about there being some sort of central entity that is like top down, like commanding and controlling things that are below it in a hierarchy. Everything kind of gets flipped on it. But so, in a traditional organization where there would be like managers and bosses, that becomes more of coaches and mentors. And in the GPS network as a whole, right? Like in a similar way, like GPS doesn't own or control any of the organizations that are in the network. They're all completely independent. And so our job isn't at all to tell anyone what to do. They all are in their own local communities. They know what is needed the best. But we're here to, give advice, to try to connect the network together, to try to figure out how to like find the best practices and synthesize that information and provide advice and mentorship for folks to take the information of the collective and figure out how to implement it and what works locally, but really decentralizing all of that.
Part of my Movement Maker Incubator course, I do a case study around how did AA grow? And that really was a decentralized movement. I mean, it literally started with him, really doing acid, right? Like that's a story that isn't told. It ended up that they have headquarters, but the headquarters are really in service to the regional offices that have control over, you go to a different AA meeting and it's going to have a completely different flavor in different towns and different places. And they also have rotational leadership, right? It's not always just this charismatic leader. And I think that's something that's really prevalent right now in the conversation, is this idea of hierarchical power and this charismatic leader. and how detrimental that can be. I mean, we can just look at the Epstein files and Deepak Chopra and all of this bullshit that's coming out that really doubles down on the importance of decentralized and not having a true figurehead, and the nucleus of the organization, like GPS, is there in service to, but is not in like, this is how we do it. Although I would love to talk to you, because a lot of my incubator, you can build a movement like that, but it really comes down to having the right agreements and the right like values in place and all of these things, so you have a container, a sandbox to play in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Every episode of the Call to Rise podcast is about the changemakers and movements reshaping our world. But the podcast is just the beginning. On my Substack, I open the door wider, sharing my personal journey with movement makers, the wins, the struggles, and the behind-the-scenes rituals that help leaders birth what's next. If you're ready to go deeper into the frameworks and practices you hear me hint at here, join me at globalmovementmaker.substack.com.
Totally. Yeah. And so, I guess I'll maybe draw a distinction to, just for purposes of like talking language wise, we have the GPS network, which is comprised of all the different psychedelic societies around the world. And then we also have the GPS team, which is, a smaller group of people that are working within kind of, and I guess we call it like a central node in a decentralized network, something to that effect. But that team working, of course, in service to that broader network. And so these principles kind of play out differently on the different levels. And yeah, so I guess I can speak within like maybe the team level, how this works. And so, yeah, we aspire to these like Teal philosophies within our team framework, and to different degrees of success at different times. And it's kind of like a work in progress, and one of the things that, and so in Teal maybe I'll give a quick, I could talk about Teal like a very
school us, Mike.
I'll give like the very quick level, like the three guiding principles in a Teal organization are: one is self-management, and the second is wholeness, and the third is evolutionary purpose. And what you're talking about in terms of agreements is really important there. And where that comes into play is self-management, right? Yes, you are in a Teal organization, you're self-managing, and you have agreements and you have accountabilities with your other teammates. So self-management, and this is definitely a point of confusion that can happen. Self-management does not mean that you can just drop your responsibilities because you're your own manager. I don't feel like doing that anymore, so sorry, good luck. No, you still have agreements with the rest of the team, and we have organizational agreements that we all have. So yes, self-management and accountability. And similarly, like wholeness, right? What that principle is about, bringing your whole self into the organization. And so what that looks like in practice is, for example, when we start a meeting, right? The first thing we do is a check-in, and we go around and everyone says kind of like where they are, like what's going on in their life. Like, oh, I'm going through a breakup right now, or, whatever is happening, like a dog just died, or oh, I had a really great time at this party this weekend. Whatever is like alive in the moment, we go around and we share that. So we're not just, a lot of times in a traditional organization, you're coming in with just like your work self. But we're encouraged in this Teal framework to come in as our whole selves. But another place where there could be confusion and where the idea of agreements comes up is like being your whole self. And it also means being, forward with like tensions and conflict, but it doesn't mean you get to come in and just like, curse someone out, for example, right? There's agreements around like behaviors that we have to do. So yes, bring your whole self, and there's agreements around like how you present, and there are some boundaries that are held. And so, yeah, this is actually really important. And I think, and that was a growth process we had to go through as an organization, is, either not having all of these agreements well defined, or not having them defined, but not necessarily like holding them well. So yeah, and having agreements and actually holding those boundaries well. And this is where the paradox comes in about leadership itself too, because you want decentralization, and there's this paradox of like, well, as a good leader of an organization that wants to be working in these more decentralized frameworks, there is a role for leadership in that too. It's just a different role. The role of leadership isn't for decisions to trickle up to you, but it's to hold the container itself for how this works, and which includes those agreements. So it's a bit like paradoxical, but you need leadership, and yeah, you need all those agreements for it all to work. And the role of leadership is to kind of hold that container of those agreements.
I love this so much because when I went through a 2-year seminary training program to become an entheogenic minister. Again, yes, I learned to hold ceremony, but really what I was learning was to hold the container for that person's work, right? And we did so much in the training was around how do you hold power and ethics. And I really learned a lot around up power versus down power and how both of those can be equally detrimental.
What's up power versus down power? I don't know this actual terminology.
Yeah, it's great. So up power is when you're like hierarchical power and you're dominating, right? Which is what we're seeing in our culture right now, right? But then there's down power where you're pretending like you don't have power, and then people don't actually have the safety to be like, wait, but who's holding the container?
Totally.
And I've been in different organizations where in the psychedelic renaissance where that up power has been really, really detrimental. And then I've also been in organizations where it's like, oh, well, we're a decentralized movement and we don't really hold power, but then people don't know, well, who is holding power and we don't really have the agreements to who hold power. So both are really important.
Yeah, totally. And like that, that's a really good point. And that was a lesson I had to learn the hard way too. It was sort of like in my own efforts to not do the dominator hierarchy thing and be decentralized. I sort of disempowered myself in a way that was not in service to the organization. And the lesson I had to learn was like, actually, what does leadership look like in this type of container? And realizing actually even though we don't want that kind of up power, actually there is a role for leadership, and it's something that I needed to do better as a leader in holding those boundaries and agreements and containers, and not letting go of those for sake of like, well, I don't want to be like the person who's the leader.
Totally. Yeah. And it goes back, I've been thinking about that tenet that you spoke about in Teal, that wholeness, because I think something that's really revolutionary within leadership right now is being able to bring your whole self into leadership, and that transparency piece, because up until now, it's been that charismatic leader that I can't make a mistake. I'm not going to say when I've done something wrong. And I think that there's this trauma that we've all been holding from our grandparents to our parents to now, where the elders and mentors and people in higher powered positions haven't had the ability to say, hey, I messed up, I'm sorry. Right. And so to show that now in leadership, I did a massive mess up in my last incubator where my people pleasing part came forward. And I created unsafety in the container. And it was me saying, hey guys, my people pleaser part came out, and I'm really sorry that I didn't hold this container in my best light, and I will be doing this moving forward. And everyone was like, whoa, I've never heard a leader say something like that before, right?
Yeah, it's super important for, leaders, everyone, especially inclusive of leaders, to take accountability and role model that. You want to create an environment where everybody is taking accountability. And as a leader, role modeling, that's really, really important. And I've had to, of course, do that myself and realize constantly needing to, we have part of the culture is of open feedback, including to people that are leaders in the organization. And so I've always receiving feedback and having to take account for places and learn and grow and improve. I think it's like a huge, huge part of the process.
Yeah, it definitely is a pathway to integration to everything that I've ever learned, especially through my psychedelic ceremonies. It's all kind of been within my head, but as I've stepped into movement building and my own leadership, all of my shit has come to the surface. And now you're actually embodying everything that you've been working. And it demands this humility and grace. And I think that transparency piece really, for me, allows freedom, because I've been like not wanting to step into leadership for so long. A, because I've seen so many conscious leaders come in with like the best intentions at heart, but then replicating harm because they're just not doing their own shadow work or, you know.
Right.
And so I didn't want to be that way. And I'm like, I don't want to own that much power. Like power to me is scary stuff.
Totally.
But now I'm like, okay, if I can be the messy human, transparent, I'm learning as I'm going, and you can come to me with this, that just like frees me up.
Yeah, totally. I can definitely relate to that too. I've definitely had periods, I can think back to times where I was like, yeah, worried about like being in power because like, well, what if I do the wrong thing? And and then but yeah, actually it's important to actually accept that, yeah, I'm gonna make missteps and gonna adjust to it. And that is the work. That's the process. And so you don't just not do the thing because you're gonna make a mistake. You have to do it and own the mistakes and keep growing and moving forward.
Exactly. Fail fast and fail forward is one of my favorite things. Mike, what do you want to say to the future movement leaders out there? What's the best piece of advice that you could give them right now as they step into their own karmic assignment and sacred work that they're here to do, especially in these times right now?
Wow. Advice to movement leaders. Well, I think for one, being able to tap into that inner knowing and, that same thing I was talking about in my ayahuasca experience. And it's a skill I'm constantly needing to like return to myself and, revisit and exercise that muscle of, slowing down, it could be like meditate and calm down and just find that there's like, when there's crunchiness, right? There's in a moment of slowing it down and you can tap into that place of inner knowing that sort of like there's an answer there on the gut level that just like kind of this is the way. So I think that's a huge one, is actually honing one's own inner connection to your inner compass, because everyone's going to have a different role, right? So like the advice I would give, one type of leader is going to be different than another type of leader, but each person has a unique and important role to play in the whole thing. And so figuring out like what is my unique role and by listening to like our own selves, that would be the biggest one. I could give more specific things for like, people that are in the wheelhouse of like community building and that kind of thing. And like, but the broadest thing is most broadly applicable is that piece.
I want to take a moment to invite you into something special called Alchemy, a 3-month one-on-one coaching journey for people who feel called to step into deeper servant leadership. In Alchemy, we weave together the insights of the Enneagram with the sacred container of plant medicine ceremonies so you can understand your patterns, release what no longer serves you, and rise as the leader that you're meant to be. If you've been feeling the pull to step into your gifts and serve from a place of clarity and integrity, I'd love to walk with you. You can learn more and apply at globalmovementmaker.com/alchemy.
Beautiful. I am actually interested in your biggest thing that you would tell community builders, because I think as AI is growing rapidly, I think that community building is going to be the biggest thing that reminds us of our humanity. And so what would you say to those community builders?
We're talking about community, so it's all about relationships at the end of the day. So if you're like a community builder and a leader of a community organization, actually building good relationships yourself is like the foundation of that piece, right? And so this is something I did share with like in a recent GPS meeting. I was encouraging all these different local leaders. And, there's questions were like, well, how do we make like events that attract people and everything? And my advice there was, wherever you are, you probably have, and, some places like the Bay Area have more than others, but you probably have some people in the psychedelic space involved in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a local university doing psychedelic research or, and some people are on the underground guides, but some are more public than others. There's people in policy, there's people in education, there's people in media. Wherever you are, though, there's probably some other people in some realm. Again, some places have more than others. People that are involved within the field in some way. So building those relationships with people locally that are involved in the space, like reach out and like go out for coffee with them and like, get to know the people that are also your other leaders in the space, and then invite those people in and introduce them to like the public. And so being that bridge, to building relationships locally, and then bringing the people you build relationships with and their wisdom and knowledge to the broader public community in your area. I think that's a place I would start.
The bridge builder for sure. Love that, Mike. How can people get a hold of all of the fabulous things that you're up to?
Yeah, well, if you want to keep track of, so the Global Psychelic Society is, of course, the big project that I'm currently focused on. So yeah, folks can follow us at globalpsychedelic.org is our website, and you can find us on all of our socials, or you can find from there and everything. But at Global Psychedelic Society on Instagram, when we're not kicked off by Meta every now and again. Yeah. It seems like every few weeks they kick us off and bring us back, and who knows. But the best way, actually, given that we don't want to be subjected to a potential meta ban, sign up for our email list. You can find that on our website at globalpsychedelic.org. If you're a leader of a local psychedelic society or community, and whether you call yourself psychedelic society or not, is not as important as like, are you organizing regularly occurring events for your community? And if you're doing that, please come join the GPS. We have a tab on our website to join the GPS network as a leader so everyone who's leading one of these organizations is welcome to be part of the network. If you also just want to find local community, we have a map on our website that will help you find your local psychedelic society. And if you don't have one in your locality, you can start one, and we've got a starter kit for that too. So all of that is at globalpsychedelic.org. And then, we talked about psychedelic seminars. That project, I'm not actively working on this moment because the focus has been on GPS, but there's videos from a whole library, dozens of past events, and that I've done, and interviews with different folks in the space. So there's a whole library of content there at psychsems.com, PsychSems, or if you look up psychedelic seminars, you will find it. So there's tons of, those are different projects where you can stay up to date.
All the goodness, goodness. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's been such a pleasure to bring your wisdom and your deep earned community development and global movement building. So thank you so much for the inspiration.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I actually can I'll make one more ask here, potentially. If there are folks that are funders out there, if you're philanthropists and you want to support what we're doing, please reach out. If you liked what you heard, Mike at globalpsychedelic.org is how you can reach me. Thanks for letting me do that plug.
Absolutely. Bring the plug in. I love it. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Call to Rise. If today's conversation stirred something in you, subscribe and share it with a fellow movement maker. And join our community at globalmovementmaker.com. Till next time, keep leading with courage, keep weaving ancient wisdom with modern strategy, and always remember to answer the call.